So your snare sucks. It has no depth, it has no punch, and it sticks out like a sore thumb in your mix. Let's fix that. Yes, what's going on, producer friends? When you know, back with another video, this time talking about snares. So for this video, I'm going to go over a few different techniques that will get your snare to come to life a little bit more. In some cases, you may want to use all of the techniques that I'm going to talk about. In some cases, you may only want to use one. Either way, this video should get you thinking about different ways you can get your snare to not sound like shit. These couple of techniques that I've come up with here in many ways mimic the old school way of recording a drum set, actually. If we were trying to record a physical snare drum, we would have two mics directly on the snare drum, one above the snare and one below the snare. The top mic would be picking up a lot of the meat of the snare, a lot of the fundamental, a lot of like the actual tone of the snare, and the bottom would actually be placed near the snares and get a lot of that crispiness, a lot of that high end. We would also potentially have other mics picking up the sound of the snare. One possibility is having overhead mics, which are usually in like a XY pattern, and sit above the drum set and pick up a lot of the overall sound of the kit, but a lot of the cymbal noises. And another would be a room mic, just a microphone that's kind of across the room, picking up a lot of the reverb and the room sound. This might sound like we're overcomplicating things, but trust me, it makes it way easier when it comes to mixing. Let me show you how. Here we are in Ableton, but a quick note before we get into it. Everything in this video can be synthesized, but I think that's a topic for another video. So today I'm going to work mostly in audio for the sake of visualization, but any of these techniques can be transferred over to MIDI very easily. So I already have some drums set up that need a snare. So the first thing is going to be finding a snare that we really like the fundamental of and the transient of, because this is going to be the main crack of our snare. Okay, so this snare has a really great fundamental sound to it. Let's go ahead and take a listen to it. But it's just massive. So let's go ahead and shorten it down a bit because we really just want the transient and that fundamental. Yeah, something like that. Let's throw an EQ on it as well so we can check out the tuning. You'll notice that if you find the fundamental frequency and actually go to it, the spectrum analyzer will tell you in the bottom left-hand corner what note it is. So it looks like this one is playing an E. Obviously, we have no other instrumentation going on in here, but you would maybe want to write something in E or maybe B or A just to make sure your snare is actually sitting in tune with everything else. That's a huge thing. So let's go ahead and rename this top mic because this is kind of our top mic. And all we really want for this kind of sound is something that's short, mono, and has a nice fundamental. I think there's a little bit of stereo going on, so let's just throw on utility, bring it down. Boom. So this is a perfect starting place. So the next thing we're going to do is have like a bottom mic. And this is where we're going to get a lot of the splash, a lot of the psh of it. So let's go ahead and find another snare sample that has something like that. Okay, so this is really nice right here. So this sample on its own has a really long tail. Let's take a listen. So that's really nice. But we don't want a lot of that transient sound because we already have a sound that's kind of taking up that space. So if we bring the fade in just a little bit, that's perfect. That's all we need because the transient is really being taken up by this top mic layer that we have. And if we don't want to keep stacking up transients because then our snare will become like plus 18 dB loud and take a bunch of headroom and make your limiters work really hard. And we don't want any of that. So just, moving that fade in a little bit is usually the move. And another weird thing I like to do sometimes on here is actually throw on a chorus or actually a corpus. And you can kind of create like a ring on the snare, similar to like if you had like a metal snare. So if the top mic was in E, let's go ahead and bring this up to E. I usually like membrane. Now you can go ahead and take a listen to how this sounds. Maybe bring the decay down even more. But it gives it like a liveliness to it. And it makes it sound like it's a real snare. So those together. And we can even go to a different note, like maybe we want to go up to a B or something. So let's bring the dry wetness down a little bit. Yeah, I think something like that is a really good starting place. So this is an awesome sounding snare in my opinion, but it doesn't have a lot of depth, right? So we want something that's a little bit wider and something that actually has maybe a little bit of reverb on it. That's where our overhead mic layer and our room mic layer are going to come into play. So let's name this one like overhead. And this is going to be something that has a little bit more character. It doesn't even really need to be a snare sound. at all, honestly. Like, we could even go for a clap. I know I have a good clap in here that I've used in a handful of tracks. Yes, this clap. Okay, so this clap, you can see, has a pretty hard transient in the beginning. So let's go ahead and take out some of that and add in a little bit of a fade. And this will be serving a lot of the same purpose as our bottom mic here, but what we're going to do to it is essentially make it really wide. So there's a handful of ways we can do that. We can put a chorus on it. We can do like a Haas effect thing. Let's do a little bit of both, actually. So Haas effect is essentially a completely dry signal, no feedback. And we are basically just having the left channel come in slightly before the right channel, or vice versa. It doesn't matter so much, but you can kind of hear what I mean if I do this. And if I accentuate it, right? So, but we're actually just going to make it so it's very, very, very subtle, but it does sound like it's flamming a little bit. And that just makes it sound like it's coming from the left side a little bit more, just gives you some more stereo. But we're also going to throw on the chorus. And I find for atonal things like this, you can go really crazy with the chorus because it's just noise, and you're not going to get any weirdness going on with any actual tones. Yeah, something like that. We'll just add a little bit of width. So let's see how it sounds. Cool. So this is a pretty sweet sounding snare so far. What we're going to do is add one more layer. This can also be done in a ton of different ways. You could do it on the group, your snare group, as a more of a bus processing thing. But I'm just going to show it as a separate layer for now, just for simplicity's sake. And it doesn't even have to necessarily be a snare again. Let's find another clap maybe. So let's throw this clap on. Yeah, that's great. And we will go ahead and just put a reverb on it. I'll just go ahead and grab this garage one. I kind of like this one. Bring the size out a little bit. And it can stay at 100% dry wet. Maybe bring the decay time up a bit. Yeah, perfect. So now let's go ahead and mix it into our snare. Sounds cool. I think it could be pitched down a little bit, though. That might sound good. And you're definitely going to want this room mic layer to be pushed back a little bit. You really don't want it up front, or it's going to feel very washed out and like it's in a big room or something like that. Unless that's something that you want. In that case, go for it. So now that we have our main snare put together, we could do some bus processing, throw on like a saturator if we want it to be super, super bricked out. And just nasty. We could put on a compressor or something like that if we want it to be a little bit more punchy. But I'm just going to stick with the saturator for now. And let's go ahead and listen to how it sounds with the rest of our kit. Now, let me show you the actual advantage of having it set up like this. If you're going through and you're writing the rest of a track and you have a lot of high-end elements and you're like, man, this really needs a lot more brightness. Instead of going in there with an EQ and just EQing the crap out of it, all we really got to do is go to our brighter elements that we have, like our bottom mic element, and turn it up, and we have a brighter snare like this. Watch, I'll show you. Or say you're like, doesn't have enough depth and needs a lot more reverb. All we got to do is turn up our reverb layer. So it's a lot of work setting it up this way in the beginning, but it makes your life down the line so much easier when you're going into mix. You can just quickly go in and mess with the levels of things. You don't need to sit there and fiddle with an EQ for 6 hours. But that is essentially the technique, guys. So I hope that you got a little something out of this and gonna try a couple of things next time you're in your DAW. If you want to support the channel, I'm on Patreon, patreon.com/whenyouknow. But other than that, I'll see you guys in the next one.